check here. Here's most likely to be better. I love collections because they're important. Because without them, we don't have data.
Anytime you can contact the actual material that we use as the basis of our knowledge and see it and discover stuff about it for yourself is automatically more valuable than pictures or diagrams or like, oh, read chapter 5 in the textbook. So I like to integrate specimens as much as possible.
And people need research materials, but things that go extinct you can't like research, like in biology collections where you can just throw them in jars. Sometimes things are already gone and you can't have another, so this is our chance.
I think that we have devalued as a society natural history collections, and that's been going on for some time now. The other thing is we don't have a lot of curatorial science that goes on here. We have a lot of scientists that use museum collections, but generally if you're writing grants or you're designing research projects, you're not necessarily doing it for curation of museum specimens per se, but you're doing it on your own area of research. And so what ends up happening, I think, is you have time to do research, but it's not necessarily on the maintenance of a natural history collection. So I think that in that sense, we have sort of let it get out of control. And
people don't know that they would be interested in collections. They don't even realize this is actually a type of career. Most people don't realize that hidden behind the exhibits at museums around the world are vast repositories of specimens and material, and that those specimens and material need maintenance and care. People all recognize that libraries need librarians, but nobody realizes that collections need managers, which in a sense are librarians in their own right for the materials that they hold.
I started working in collections when I was an undergraduate here at Bloomsburg, when Dr. Gischlick, the paleontologist, wanted help organizing the paleontology collections, because at first they were all just in like boxes and boxes and boxes. Definitely not archivally preserved. So I love like little tiny tedious activities. So for the first 3 years I was writing really, really tiny numbers on all the invertebrate fossils because I love paleontology and I had lots of questions of paleontology, so this helped me get more like into it and actually work with specimen. And then I just kept doing it and kept loving it. This is an example of the little numbers I've been writing for the past 4 years. Really, really, really tiny. This one's Astarte, I guess.
so we have a number of specimens that can be used for teaching that I like to use, and I have, particularly my comparative anatomy class, I bring out a lot of skulls from the collection to look at some variation that we see in the vertebrate body plan. And we also have other specimens that sometimes I'll bring out just for demonstration purposes, like the bird collection. I'll go through those and we'll look at, say, woodpecker skulls and look at specializations for prying wood and excavating wood and things like that. So. We would benefit, I think we would benefit from not just having a larger collection, but having an organized collection, so that if we needed to get a specimen, we could go in and know exactly where that specimen is. It could be in taxonomic order or even numerical order. As long as we had a catalog that we could refer back to, then we can go in and access that specimen. So absolutely we could benefit from having not only a larger space for our existing collection, but having more specimens to look at a more comprehensive view of our area of Pennsylvania.
I like being able to handle specimen that people haven't been able to see or touch for millions of years, and it's kind of really cool and like really like sets you or like helps you realize like how small in this world we actually are and like where we came from. And we wouldn't be able to do that without people caring about collections and caring about research materials. And yeah, I just really like them. So like I recognize that like my duty as a curatorial assistant, collections manager, museum scientist, museum researcher on like a little university level or like a large scale like prestigious museum level, like it's all important to preserve the specimen and ensure their stability and their accurate specimen data for the use of researchers, educators, and the public.
I think the key thing is that collections, both of the biological, geological, and paleontological nature, serve as records for past and present biodiversity, as well as the variety of materials that make up the Earth. So if we want to be able to study the history of past life or present life or the changes in the chemical composition or the environment of the Earth, we really need to go to what we consider vouchers, things that serve as a reference point from which we can determine things that have happened. And one of the great places to do that is in the context of museums. So when you go to a museum, be it a place like the American Museum or the Smithsonian, or in a collection of a college or university, what you're looking at is a storage facility for a vast array of potential materials. And basically what you would ever see on display at a museum is a small fraction of what a museum actually has. Most of what a museum has is held in their research collections, which are available to scientists and researchers to conduct research on under conditions where they can be properly maintained and cared for. One of the goals that I have here at Bloomsburg is to help train students in the practices that are involved in keeping and caring for collections, both as both to serve our own university in terms of maintaining our own collections that we use for the purposes of teaching and student-faculty research collaboration, but also because there's potential employment, there's careers in collection management, and that having the skills and knowledge of collection management will help students get jobs working at museums, or for students who want to go into research, this will enable them to have a better idea of how to use and care for collections should they ever end up at an institution that has collections of some form.
The majority of my duties within the collections, within the paleo collections and the biology collections, is rehousing, cataloging, and databasing the information. So that's putting them in special archival boxes, and cataloging them would be giving them a number and then associating their data with the number and then inserting that data into a database, which right now is Excel. I had 2 internships at the American Museum of Natural History, which was also just continuing more invertebrate paleo stuff, where I was just rehousing, curating. I was just rehousing and just digitizing the data that was already provided. And then my Smithsonian internship, I was at the Natural History Museum as well, but I was mostly focused on a conservation side of things, so to learn more how to keep ensure the stability of the specimen.
A lot of these collections and institutions are in very poor condition because no one really knows how to take care of them. And while you might think, well, what does it really matter? It's just a small university. What does it matter if, that there's a bunch of salamanders that some students collected in the 1960s? Well, this actually is very important because a lot of times these small regional collections are really good sources for what we call voucher specimens. If we really want to understand about climate change and how it's affecting region, well, we have to know how is it affecting the biology. Well, that matters because, if you go out and your zoology collector, your botany class in 1950 collected plants or collected various animals that lived in local rivers and streams, that becomes a basis for what lived in this place at this time. And you can then compare it to what you could collect in a stream today or in the forest today, and you can say, wow, the vegetation's changed. The species, the biota, the ecology has changed. Well then, why is this changing? Are we seeing species now living in the rivers here that are from further south, suggesting that warming climate has pushed their ranges north? Have we seen certain species that are less cold, or that are more cold tolerant being affected? Or have we seen changes that might relate to deforestation or or things related to how land use is changing, farming versus less farming. So all these things, these collections become really important and can be of value to researchers. They just don't realize they're there, and the people at the institutions themselves don't realize that, well, I might have the furthest north locality ever recorded of a particular animal back in the 1950s. And we're finding that as we've been going through and organizing and curating and conserving our existing biological collection, that we're finding new occurrences of animals that we didn't know were here because no one had really taken note of it back when they were collected 50 or 60 years ago. And so management of these collections becomes important. These collections aren't just for teaching, or can't just be sort of callously thrown away, oh, well, we don't really need them because we're not teaching a class in this morning, without going through and making sure that these aren't actually things that would be of value for scientific research.
We do have a number of specimens. Sean Hartzell was a student here a couple of years ago, and he's teaching here now, and he did a couple of publications on the importance of the collection, and he came through and found a number of specimens that were county records and had not been described as being in Columbia County or in other surrounding counties around here. So yeah, there's a lot of gems in our small collection. So.
What's also nice is when you find something like a new occurrence of an animal or a plant in the collections, that becomes the basis for a student research project, for someone's senior thesis or master's project. So it really becomes a valuable tool, both in terms of the greater scientific community as a whole, but in terms of advancing student learning at the class and university level.
I think that we definitely need, I think it's very important to recognize that if we are going to understand biodiversity and the diversity of life on the planet, that we need to understand its variation. And the way you do that is to look at specimens firsthand, hands-on, look at the variability, and have that, I guess, have that available to study in an organized fashion.